Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to What's the Point? Another great guest today. I'm very blessed to have a great guest every week, it seems. Today's guest is Barry Engelhardt. Hello, Barry.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Bill.
It's a pleasure. Let me introduce you to everyone. What I love about Barry is he's the kind of guy that when you say, how would you like to be introduced? The first thing he puts down is father and husband. So family is really important to him. But to go from there, he calls himself a reformed art miscreant. We will talk about that in a minute. He refers to himself as a professional generalist who collects knowledge and experience. So he spent 10 years of his business career in operations and then transitioned into HR, human resources. He's business educated and a veteran with 20 years, including combat deployment. And he does a lot of work in the nonprofit area in the veteran space in a bunch of different ways. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we talk. So that's quite a handful right there. What I really want to talk about, though, is this, because this gets to the essence of this man that I absolutely love, the essence and the man. Barry believes in a growth mindset, the power of the written word. Get ready for this one. Listening to understand that small things done consistently change the world, and that Third Eye Blind was the most underrated band of his youth. We will talk about Third Eye Blind as well. And here's another thing that I love. He's opposed to binary thinking. It's not either or. There's a lot more to it than that. And he actually refers to that as the evils of an either or mindset. So Barry, you are an endless learner, a man of great curiosity, a man of diverse knowledge and talent. And that's why you call yourself a generalist, I assume. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Well, there was a point in my life where I thought it was my Achilles heel. I kind of have a theory that as one starts in business, being a generalist is a very good thing because of that diversity. But there's kind of an arc where you hit a point where you're suddenly competing with specialists, and it's really hard to compete with specialists at that point. But if you get past that point, being a generalist becomes very powerful and very helpful yet again, especially on the higher levels of things, because you can kind of look downward from the clouds and see and connect dots in ways that people looking through a more narrow focus might not, or just see things differently than most people do.
Yeah, so another way of saying that is you have, as a generalist, a more well-rounded viewpoint on things, more information about a variety of things that might be in addition to the specialist thinking. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't compete with a specialist at specialized things, but I can bring different vantages that complement and compare and contrast for sure.
Okay. So you started in a pretty small town called Pinckneyville, Illinois. So you grew up in small town, Midwestern America. What was your childhood like?
I was very lucky. I don't think I realized how lucky I was at the time. I think things that at 18 seem kind of stifling suddenly become charming and nostalgic a little older, but I grew up in a very blue collar background. My father's probably the hardest working person I've ever met, and I definitely think there's a lot of him that was instilled in me. But conversely, you talk about me identifying myself first and foremost as father and husband. Well, my dad worked any and every shift, swing shifts, alternating shifts, overtime. Work always came first and needed to come first. And I have utmost respect for that, but it also kind of sets the knowledge base in me that there's a certain balance that I try to find. I've been gone a lot, weekends, weeks at a time in the summer during my military. And I'd like to think I've hit a point where sometimes I can prioritize and cut back and say, I'm going to work really hard when I'm working, but I also want to be home and spend that quality time with my two little hooligans. My boys are 3 and 5. So I think I try to take a lot of the great things that from my childhood, but also understand the sacrifices and consider myself very lucky that I'm in a place where I don't have to make some of those sacrifices.
Well, I appreciate that mindset. I really, truly do. And boys 5 and 3 years old, you must be having a blast, having just a ton of fun with them, and maybe at times having a bit of a headache and wondering what the heck's going on.
They're definitely in the boundary testing stage of development, but it's fun and funny and also frustrating.
Yeah. Well, take it from me, the boundaries get pushed even more as they grow, and I'm sure you're expecting that, and I'm sure you'll handle it with great parenting skill. So you had a dad who worked really hard, and did he get to college or did he not get to college?
Ironically, he went to college on a scholarship, but dropped out, which was a very common thing to do where I grew up at that time frame, because the rationale was I could go to college for 4 years and make X as an engineer, which is what my dad was studying, or I can go straight from the high schools to the coal mines and make X. Mm-hmm. And so college almost was looked at as this sunk cost. Now there's certain things where you could build and make more income probably over time as an engineer, but it really took a lot of time. Like I knew a friend of the family who actually studied to be an accountant and had a similar mindset and did the calculations. And it was totally like, it would take him 20 plus years to recoup the 4 years you lost going to college as opposed to going straight to the coal mines. And that's just what people in Southern Illinois in that time frame did. So my dad was of the realization that I could move and eventually make more money, or I could stay where I'm at, which is where I want to be, and make good money. Obviously, there's a lot of politics and up and downs in the coal mines that happened over the next 20, 40 years. But at that time, the prevailing logic was college might not be necessary.
Yeah. And, that seems as though it's becoming more apparent in our time today. And the reason I asked was not to necessarily have any opinion one way or the other about your dad, but I know that you went to school at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, which is a pretty highly regarded university. And you studied both psychology and English creative writing. So the reason I ask is I also know you to have a voracious appetite for learning. So I just didn't know if that was kind of emulating your father's or mother's footsteps, or if it's just something that was inherent in you, or what fuels your craving for knowledge?
I think there is a lot of my dad. My dad is one of the most diversely intelligent people that you'll ever meet. Now, knowing my dad and having a theory of what he should know and what he shouldn't know, sometimes I think he might just be BSing, but he can connect and have an intelligent conversation about any subject matter. I've never really felt like he was stumped. He also spent his entire life as a mechanic at coal mines and steel mills. He's not necessarily stereotypically someone you would expect that from. Mm-hmm. But his intellect is probably off the charts, okay, I would guess. But I think more than anything, I fell in love with reading. At one point in time, when I was finishing college, I thought I was going to go to grad school to do creative writing and live in pretentious mountains and read and write pretentious literature and see if I could become a published author. Life shifted and I never got back to that, and I have no complaints. But I'd say from an early, probably in high school, I fell in love with readings through like Kurt Vonnegut and Ken Casey and read a lot of fiction.
Okay.
When I went to grad school, I did a 2-year professional MBA program, and I probably read 2 books that entire time just because it was all MBA all the time other than my 50, 60 hour a week job.
Yeah.
So there came a point where I missed reading, and I've always been bad at New Year's resolutions, but one year I said, I'm not giving up something. I'm going to try to read more. I'm going to try to read a book a year or a book a week for this next year. And while I've rarely hit the 52 books, I've came close, and this is probably my 5th year, and it just added up over time.
Well, I can tell you that given your posts and your input on LinkedIn, and it's Barry Engelhardt, Engelhardt. You can find him on LinkedIn. The direct connection will be in the show notes. But Barry is a tremendous follow on LinkedIn because he is always providing value. And if you're familiar with the website called Goodreads, which is a site dedicated to evaluating books and information on books, Barry could be my personal Goodreads. The number of books that he has read and commented on have really helped me. And without fail, they have all been very interesting. And a lot of them have a tie to the military. So let me go there just for a minute. When you were either still at undergrad or maybe just out of undergrad, you joined the Army National Guard, yes?
Yeah. So when I started college, my parents had always made enough money, but not enough money. What I mean by that, they made enough money. They could have paid for my college, but it would have been hard for them. And they didn't really qualify. I didn't really qualify for a lot of financial assistance because of they were just kind of at that awkward threshold. And so I thought, the joke's on you. I found out you can enroll, in this ROTC class, and I can take a class and get my education paid for 2 years. And so I did that. I won't say as a joke. I was curious, but it just seemed like this too good to be true. Like, take one class, get up once a week and work out in the morning and do a couple other things, and your tuition's paid for. So I did that for about 1.5 years. And then a good buddy of mine joined the National Guard. And for some silly reason, I was like, well, this is the way to continue this. Why not sign up? Why not give this a shot? So my sophomore year, I took a semester off and went through boot camp and AIT. And then from there on, my tuition was paid for. I gave them a 6-year commitment and probably never dreamed of staying past the 6, but there always seemed to be more reason to re-enlist than there didn't from then on. I mean, I joined in 99, so it was a very different world when I hit my 6 years than when I signed up. When I signed up, worst case scenario was like you go to flood duty and drink a lot of beer and throw some sand in bags, and it's kind of a fun little occasion where the whole city's happy to have you there and treats you good. But obviously, a couple years later, the expectations of a National Guard unit shifted dramatically.
Right. So let me go back just for a real minor point for my own learning and maybe for a lot of listeners. You mentioned you went to boot camp, which I think most of us have a pretty good idea of what that means. But did you say you also went to AIT? What?
Yes. Okay. So in the Army, there's 2 schools. There's boot camp, which is kind of the foundational school that everyone goes through boot camp. It's the same. You have people from everywhere. AIT can be different lengths of time, different creature comforts, different freedoms based on what you choose. But that's like your specialty. That's like, if I'm going to be an infantryman, I go through infantry AIT. If I'm going to be a medic, I go through medic AIT. And obviously, they can be very diverse in expectations and timelines, but for the most part, they're just a continuation of boot camp in order to teach you to go do exactly what you've chosen to do.
And what was your choice? What was your focus in AIT?
It was combat arms. It was an artilleryman, which two reasons. One, there were really only a couple I could do and complete and only miss one semester. And two, it's what my buddy was doing. So again, foolishness all around. But I started out in artillery, and then about 5 years into my tenure, they switched the job of the unit, which you went to drill one weekend, and by the way, you're an infantryman now, and we're going to send you so you can be an infantryman, which sounds insane, but when you factor in I'd already done a 2-year deployment where I was a military police officer without ever being trained to be a military police officer other than a quick spin up, it was what it was. And there's a lot of similarities, some differences.
Okay. And so you were deployed. Were you deployed to the Middle East? I think you might have been a part of the Operation Enduring Freedom, maybe?
Yes. Yeah, I spent 2008 and 2009 with an all-expense paid vacation to Ghazni, Afghanistan.
Okay. Anything you want to share from there? Or are you willing just to walk from it? Either way is fine. It's up to you.
I was very lucky that what I was selected to do was called a non-kinetic mission, which meant we were never looking for battles. I worked for what they called a preventional reconstruction team. It was kind of a podge of individuals focused on the hearts and minds aspect. I worked with a lot of medics, a lot of civil engineers, people who were kind of assessing what the area needed to provide stability other than chasing and fighting bad guys, and trying to react to and provide to the best that they can. Probably the biggest lesson I learned while there was just how different life could be. It wasn't lost on me that it's very easy to think, oh, I'm the good guy or the liberator, but it's also very easy for me to recognize that if I was born where they were or where they are in the same time and as a male and grew up through their society, it's like I could have very easily, based on circumstance, been on the other side of the spectrum. So they kind of made me realize there's a certain complexity and humanity and non-one-sidedness of everything. I mean, there's a lot of confliction, a lot of differences of opinions just within that populace, let alone you add all of our conflictions and our wills and our theories in life. And it's just, I mean, that nation's been at war for centuries with maybe 50 years total of reprise. Someone has always been there trying to inflict their will upon that area for a variety of reasons, some more noble than others, but none theirs.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to necessarily go down the path of any type of political debate or anything in that area. However, I will say that one of the things it sounds like you really had reinforced in your belief by being there is the ability to see different sides, to see different perspectives, and to hear different perspectives. And what's important about that, I think, is we can recognize different thinking and different concepts and different backgrounds, different cultures, a bunch of differences. That doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have to agree with it all. But if we're not even aware of it, if we're not willing to accept that there are different people with different thoughts and different circumstances, it really does get to an either or, and that probably leads to many more problems than it is necessary. Absolutely.
I think if you can't find the common ground, then you're always going to be entrenched and closed-minded on the other side. No one, if two people are bunkered in, no one's ever going to cross and find the commonality to work out from.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is true when in a different country. That's true when in a different neighborhood in this, wherever we might be. So let me backtrack a little bit here, Barry, because your military involvement has certainly had played a significant role in your life and influence on you and connections that have been created. And we'll come back to some of those in a bit. But I also want to go back to when you first enlisted, when you were first getting out of college, and your belief was that you were going to be, the next Warren Buffett or a financial advisor extraordinaire. Is that where your career first took you?
It started and ended rather quickly. I realized what I was and wasn't good at. I got allured in by a financial company and moved to St. Louis. And I won't say they misled me in any way. I think I was 23 and saw what I wanted to see and thought I was going to play in stocks and bonds all day. But I didn't realize that, one, I have to find these stocks and bonds to play with, which means that I have to first and foremost sell to people. And two, that a computer will do 99.8% of what I was excited about in the concept just by entering in the demographics into the system and hitting enter. And there's someone behind the scenes somewhere in a job that I did not land that's really doing what I thought I was going to be doing and what I wanted to be doing at the time. So I realized very quickly, I think I was told that I was far, far too monotone and I would never be a good salesman. I don't know if I disagreed at the time. I think, they were 100% right at the time. Maybe I could be a much better salesman today, but I definitely felt like my strengths and what I had chose to do did not co-align in the way that I thought they would at the onset of that endeavor.
Well, I think that's great experience because it helped you to hone in your purpose. But just a comment on sales then and in that industry, because I played in that a little bit a long time ago, there are many people in that business who have what I would call a misconstrued interpretation of the word sales, where it's, you will take this because I need sales, as opposed to, hey, here's some services that will help you reach your goal. And those are two different things. And I'm pretty confident I know you well enough that saying, here's something, and that approach of, you will buy this because I need it, and that kind of forceful approach wasn't going to fit well with your integrity and with your values. So where'd you go from there?
Soon thereafter, I worked for Wayland Security. I spent probably close to 10 years there. Mostly I was a client services manager. I managed the accounts. I had a portfolio of accounts, anything from hotels to some of the biggest corporate high-rises in St. Louis. And I was the liaison with the client and then also with the employees for those accounts. Okay.
So that was that operations, or was that when you segued into HR?
That was operations. I was technically an operations manager, but there was a lot of HR intertwinings. I kind of, when I first started getting into the HR arena, I basically said that I had a HR in the background job because operations was the forefront. But in order to make sure the accounts were running smoothly, managing the humans was pretty darn important and almost foundational. So there were a lot of intertwinings, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's one thing that you and I agree very strongly on, the importance of paying attention to the humans involved in business for any number of reasons. So when you moved into human resources officially, was that a choice you made? Did you consciously say, boy, this is an area that really appeals to me? or was it somewhat more opportunistic and you said, yeah, I can do that, and then you kind of found out that you were really good at it?
It was kind of some of both. I was laid off and definitely looking for my next adventure. And it was an arena I was pursuing, but it was also an arena where people that I meshed well offered me a job when I needed a job. And so I jumped at the opportunity, and I think I knew what I was getting myself into, and I turned out I wasn't wrong, but it was kind of a leap of faith and a leap of curiosity and a growth step for sure.
Well, I think it's an amazing move, and I think there's a lot to take from that for everyone listening. So it's not necessarily that Barry nor I are touting HR, but what we are talking about is being on this journey of discovering our purpose and clarifying our purpose and refining and seeing how it evolves and how it meshes with our inner workings as a human, our core values, our desires, our goals. And you started with an idea that the financial world seemed right for you. And it turned out at least the scenario you ended up in was completely wrong, but you learned a lot there, well beyond the financial area. You learned about what selling is and what selling isn't to some people, and that you weren't comfortable regardless. You were very willing to take on the next opportunity without 100% conviction that you knew what it was, or that that it's where you wanted to go. And that's what oftentimes we have to do. Oftentimes we have to roll the dice. We have to step out of our comfort zone. And sometimes we just have to see where this takes us. And you did that both going into the Wayland security job, but then also when you took the next opportunity into HR. So you've been in HR for 15 years now, more or less?
Only about 6 or 7.
Oh, really? Okay.
I guess I'm in my 8th year. I spent 6 years at my last company. During that process, it was acquired, did a name change, and there were a lot of comings and goings, but I spent about 6 years there. And then about a year and a half ago, actually a month before COVID hit, I switched to my current company.
Okay. And how's that working?
Much better. I feel it's much better aligned with who I am and how I think than I'm just not a short-sighted person. And a company owned by an equity investor, they have certain wants and needs that I fully understand and respect, but they're just not, they don't correlate with who I am and how I think and what I want both to get and to give within a company.
You know, once again, Barry, you just presented some great insight, which is the company you were with was purchased and run by an equity company, and they are focused on profit. They are focused on making those companies as lean as possible and selling them for as high a profit as they can. But what you said was you don't have an issue with that. That's not a problem. And it's not. It's legitimate business, although it's sometimes painful to a lot of people. But it does take out of the equation the human element in lots of cases. But what I loved is you recognized it. You say, that's great. It's just not me. Let me go where my values are going to be addressed and assuaged.
Absolutely. I think you need to know even more so what you want, what you don't want. I think I've heard you reference it same way that I've heard my wife reference it to deal with the personal relationships, which is just non-negotiables. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what you want and what you need, but it's really easy to say, I know what I don't want, and that's this, or I know what's not congruent with who I am, and that's that. And if you start with that and whittle your way through, suddenly you have a pretty strong lane of, at minimum, curiosities and interest points of what you think you want by default.
Yeah, and a great point. We have talked about that. For transparency, Barry and I are also, we are partners in a mastermind group that meets once a week. So we've talked about a lot of things, which is how I discovered how knowledgeable and how impressive Barry is and why I wanted him as a guest on this show. But understanding our non-negotiables, be it, like you said, in a personal relationship or in a business relationship, I'm going to talk in the context of business for a moment. If we know what we don't want to do, if we identify that, and we are then presented with an opportunity in that arena, we already know our answer. We already know why we won't entertain that. So that gives us the opportunity to decline or avoid in a tactful, professional way with our own reasoning, whether we explain it or not. But the other thing it allows us to do is potentially say, that's not something I would do, but I know someone that you might speak with. So that does three things. It gets us off the hook from feeling uncomfortable about whether we want to take this opportunity or not, because we already know it's non-negotiable. It lets us tell the person that's approaching us or the company, hey, here's the one way that you might be able to solve your situation. And they go, okay, thanks for the lead. And whoever you reference, be it a company or an individual, is going to say, well, they were thinking of me. That's cool. So I got a referral. So that kind of brings a positivity to it. The other thing it does, and you just referenced this, is it takes away, it eliminates a lot of wasted time and it takes away a lot of the capacity that it takes both in heart and mind to determine what we like, whether we would like something. So it's a great thing to do, the non-negotiables. Were there things in your current job that were either on or maybe ancillary to your non-negotiable list that really gave you pause for whether this was the right move for you or not? Or was it pretty clear, yeah, this looks like a real good fit?
I could see from the conversations I had that leadership cared for their workforce and they were supportive of their workforce. Now, I'm a firm believer that most corporations don't really understand what it's like to be your frontline worker. I think there's a certain division, I think I know, but I really don't. But I didn't really feel like that was the case here. And frankly, knowing what I was looking for and what I didn't like, it makes it easy to make kind of take the power struggle out of an interview process. You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I mean, I have no doubt that, I wasn't actively looking, but there are interviews that I went into that I have no doubt that I walked out of with them putting big X's over my name because I let it known who I was, what I wanted, what I needed, what I could give. And I put it all on the table and as constructively and as professionally as I could, but I would say, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I can give you. But I did it probably under a fairly narrow window. So it had to be a match. If it wasn't a match, they were tearing up my resume by the time I hit the parking lot because it was.
Well, yeah, but so there again, knowing what you wanted, knowing for a fact what you didn't want, made it much more efficient for you. And frankly, it was probably the best interview they had, whether you met their needs and expectations or not, because there was no game playing.
Yeah. And I was also very lucky in the fact that I had a job and I knew that, a lot of times, a lot of people don't get that luxury, but I definitely had it and was more than happy to exploit it to make sure that when I made a move, I worked for a man who worked for the same coal mine until they closed down and then retired from my father, he worked for the same coal mine until it closed down. And then he worked for a steel mill until it retired. Like, I don't want to job hop. It's not who I am. It's not my wiring. So when and if I'm going to make a move, and frankly, I'm not a huge fan of extreme change. I believe in change, but my biggest concern was not knowing getting myself into a situation where they had great values and they interviewed well, but the place either was going to work me to death, which wouldn't have worked because, again, I have a wife and children that I like seeing, or else like everything was just lip service and writing on a wall. And then why would I leave? So I felt there was a lot of reason to be very careful and very cautious and make sure that I knew the devil of the place I was. I realized that everything was going to be new at my new place. So it was a little bit of a give and take, but at the same time, I did it long enough I got really lucky that I figured it out.
Well, I'm glad it seems to have worked out so well. I know it's just over a year and certainly in unique circumstances, given what we've all gone through with COVID and lockdowns, the pandemic impact, but it seems to be working well for you. But when you just said maybe you were lucky, I'm not going to let you get away with that because is there some luck? Maybe, but there is also a lot of proactive thinking, planning, strategizing and learning on your part so that you had a much better idea going into a situation, whether it was right or not. So is it luck? I'm going to call BS on that. But I am going to bring up, so everyone listening, every week after you listen to What's the Point, which is the best podcast going, I'm going to suggest another podcast that Barry and I both listen to. It's one by Jordan Harbinger. And I bring him up because one of the things he says in his course on networking and building a network, and I hate the word networking, but in his course, which is free, of helping people understand how to build relationships and have meaningful connections, he uses this statement: don't wait to dig the well when you're thirsty. Dig the well first. And that's kind of what you've just said you've done. You've done a lot of learning and you've done a lot of thinking. You've done a lot of growing on your part. And that's what we can all learn from. So everyone listening, what Barry talked about here is not just luck. If we relied on luck, I don't think any of us would be where we wanted to be, not nearly as many. So all of that's great in your professional life, and I love it and I respect it. But as much as anything, the reason I want to have you here today is I want to talk to you about your dedication to reading, your enthusiasm for reading. When you talk about reading a book a week, and I mentioned earlier to check out Barry on LinkedIn because he gives some great books and some great insight as to why to read the book. What number are you on now? So we are recording this on May approximately 10th. So you're four and a half months in. How many books do you have so far?
I think I'm at 25. I have not reviewed them all because there's a couple people I have great respect for. But when I read the book, one of two things happened. Either it wasn't their greatest book or it wasn't for me specifically. It's likely the second, but the last thing I want to do is take an author who I respect. I mean, a person who wrote the book I've probably recommended more than any book in my life. I didn't like their most recent book at all. I have nothing constructive to say about it, so I have nothing to say about it. So
yeah, and I respect that. I respect that a great deal because, you know, part of the other thing what you're saying is sometimes we find someone that we think quite a bit of, and then we read their work or get more exposed to them, and we get a little bit of a look behind the curtain, and we find that maybe there's a little tarnish on that halo. So what I really can't get over is you've read, let's just say 25 books so far this year. And it's what I love is it's not for you a matter of how many books I can read. It's how much can I learn from the books I read. And the more I read, the more I can learn. So when Barry reads a book, he takes from that book. It's not just glassing over it, flipping pages, reading the first sentence or the first paragraph on every page. He reads the damn book and he learns from it. So when you talk about, you talked about having a job where you didn't want them to work you to death because you wanted time with your wife and boys. And then I said, and I see, I know how hard you work. I know how much you work. I know how much you spend time with your wife and boys. And then you throw on that the reading. What's it like to never sleep?
Oh, I sleep 8 hours a night. Audible on 2-speed is my friend. If I'm in a car, it's just me, at least, it's playing. And I mean, if someone were to read 15 pages a night for an entire year, they've read 13 books in a year. It kind of going back to my intros, small things done consistently add up. If I'm in a car 20 minutes on my way to work and I have it at 2-speed, I mean, to and from work, I've went an hour and a half, give or take, into a book. I mean, it doesn't take long for those little chunks to build up, and throw another 5 or 10 minutes on the way to the gym and back, and suddenly you've knocked out a book on Audible in a week. I mean, it's, and I can't even go back to listening to it at normal speed. It sounds like someone is like being slowed down now. It took me a while to get there. Unless I have like a really strong British accent, like I can't not listen at double speed.
Okay. Yeah, it certainly is an adjustment, and I don't think often enough to put it, because I think we can also put it at 1.5 speed, which there are some people I've read that I've had to put it at 1.5 speed just to get it to what I consider normal. So you said to and from work, you said to and from the gym. You didn't say you listen to Audible at the gym. So am I correct in assuming that when you're at the gym and you have your ear pods in, that you're just listening to Third Eye Blind on repeat the whole time?
That is when I actually listen to music. Can't do a walking workout. I have to have something with a little bit more pep in my step, or I will daydream, or I will remember how much I hate being at the gym, which is pretty profound. So I need something a little bit more swallow me up.
Okay. Well, obviously I was kidding about the nonstop Third Eye Blind, but it is interesting to hear someone say that they're the most underrated band of your childhood. Any stories there? Anything behind that, or is it just a band you've always liked that didn't seem to get as much recognition as you thought they deserved?
I threw that into the end of an intro the first time I did a public speaking, just trying to have something quirky and non-boring about my 2-sentence bio introduction. And the crowd actually cheered, and it made me feel a little less intimidated because, mind you, I was third. I followed a guy who was on an international book tour, and then the woman who is the president of Dale Carnegie St. Louis. And then I was third for my first public speaking engagement ever. So to say that I felt a little bit awkward and intimidated would be an understatement. But seeing the crowd kind of just laugh and clap and helped relax me a lot. So for whatever reason, when I'm writing bios, I throw something like that, or frankly, that yet again in there. There's really not a huge story or depth to it. I do.
Okay.
But
well, again, another great learning point, and that is, we're all to some degree in the storytelling business. I mean, it's when you get down to it. So when you're public speaking, to throw something in that makes you more relatable to the audience, not only is it going to make you more relatable, but understand the more we can throw something in there that's going to pique the audience's interest, in particular if it's a multiple speaking engagement or a day-long business conference where it's speaker after speaker, something that shakes it up and like you said, can have a little fun, goes a long way. So that's a great lesson for all of us to take there as well. So we talked earlier about you being a reformed art miscreant. So let's move from music to art. I need to know more about that. Share with us what you mean by that.
I think one thing I'm lucky on, and I think my father as well, so maybe it's genetics or maybe it's just living in that household. I think I'm not left-brained or right-brained. And I mean, to me, the biggest art is the written word. It doesn't get enough credit because it goes on a page and you don't, it's an active process, I think, as opposed to a passive. But I don't think there's a more beautiful or profound art out there than reading Faulkner or something of that nature. But I love music. I played 3 instruments in band. I took art classes my entire high school. Frankly, I had long hair, dyed hair, and I dressed like a little punk hooligan. I mean, I think there's certain aspects of that that have stayed inside of me that dictate how I think and who I am, but I also don't think it's something that someone I met on the street today that I knew for a year would ever pick up or see.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. And I suspect at some point that art, talent, and urge is going to make a pretty strong reappearance. And hopefully your boys get a taste of that too, and become a little bit more well-rounded rather than just 2 rambunctious little young boys, with nothing wrong with that, by the way. You do some work. You're still connected. You still have connection with your military ties. And you do some editing for authors, and I don't know if that's military or not. You do some book reviews or author reviews with a military publication. I think you dabble some in some not-for-profit work. Share with me how you continue your ties with the military, Barry.
I think when I hit my 20 years, I was so far beyond done and ready to retire, it wasn't even funny. But when I looked at what I was going to miss most, I think it was like brotherhood and service. And I felt like I needed something to keep that aspect of me alive, because I think it was a part of really where my passion and where my heart was. But I also, I mean, a lot of nonprofits, it's go volunteer on a Saturday morning and help paint a school or things of that nature. And that just wasn't me. I'd spent 20 years sacrificing my weekends and weeks in the summer. I wasn't ready to do that. I wanted to do something with my brain. And I met a gentleman, Glenn, who is the CEO for Operation Supply Drop, or OSD, which transitioned into Heroic Forces. And their main claim to fame is they used to do basically care packages for troops overseas that weren't focused on what people needed, but what they wanted. It was a big tie into the gaming community. They would give video game consoles and coffee and things, video games, things of that nature. But they were also trying to add a professional development arm. And Glenn and I had a couple conversations about him wanting to start basically almost like a book club for veterans, where if they're willing to put the work into it, we're willing to, through a lot of donations from a lot of great authors, Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, Sebastian Junger, Jocko Willink, the list could go on. Here in St. Louis, Brandon Dempsey, John O'Leary. I mean, a lot of great people have been very gracious and very welcoming to this, to supply a lot of books that have went into a lot of veterans' hands. And what I liked most about it were 2 things. One, it was at the intersection of really my 2 biggest passions, which is figuring out a way to give back to veterans, but also the power of the written word to help people. But the other thing was that I wanted it to be about actually doing the work. I didn't want it to be another hand a veteran a gift because they're a veteran. I don't believe in that. I believe that's, in a way, I don't want to say demeaning or victimizing, but it's the first words that come to mind. I know it's very, very much meant with heart and love, but I think on both sides there's a very small percentage of entitled veterans out there that just run around giving the other 99% a bad rap with this gimme, I deserve. And I don't believe in that, but I also don't believe in you just hand somebody something because they're a veteran, but they made their choices and they did what they did. I want to empower people who are trying to build themselves. And so Glenn and I had a couple conversations, and at the end of the second one, I thought he was going to say, hey, cut me a check and we'll donate a couple books to people every month and it'll be great. When I offered, how do I help? Instead, he said, do you want to run the thing? My first answer was hell yes. My second answer, which was only inside my own head's, what the hell does that mean? I have no idea what I just got myself into.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I did get myself into a sales job, and I've been very lucky and had a lot of very positive interactions with people that I have great respect for that have been nothing but perceptive to the cause. But again, I think people understand that we're trying to help people who want to help themselves. And these people, well, anybody deserves that type of an environment. These people have done something to deserve a little bit more maybe, but they got to do their part.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful concept, and it's typical Barry that you ended up volunteering not knowing what you were getting into. But one thing you talked about, which I think is really important for all of us to keep in mind, and that is transitioning from one career to a whole different career or lifestyle. And it's pretty evident in the military. It's also very evident in the world of athletes, where an athlete and most military end their careers at what we consider a reasonably young age, anywhere from 30s to 40s for athletes, and probably similar to a lot of the military who just do one or two tours. But what you said was that brotherhood and that camaraderie is what's missing, and trying to replace that by saying, here, come here and do this job, or come here and do that job, is it's great to offer that, but how do you replace that feeling? And with athletes, it's that locker room banter and that whole that boys club, if you will, or girls club in the case of female athletics. Replacing that is what too many people overlook. And so I assume that you see that being replaced somehow in your work, your volunteer work with the books.
I do, and I think what gets lost is there's a lot of companies that are considered military friendly, a lot of companies that get a bad rap because someone somewhere's decided they're only pretending to be military friendly. But I don't think you can mass produce that reproduction. I think to get to the principles you believe in, which I believe in as well, it's the passion. Like, a company can't decide and supply something that's going to fulfill every veteran's passion. It's just impossible. There's no way. We're not cookie cutters. We're not 40 versions of the same person. So I think it's going to be on the veteran to realize, to be self-aware, to find out what their values are, to say, this is what matters to me, and this is how I had that, and this is how I fill that void, so I'm not left without it. And unfortunately, it's work. And I think even more unfortunately, we see what happens when people can't fill that void, and people leave that community and that brotherhood, and then best case scenario become a alcoholic or a drug user because they're trying to fill that void unproductively, and it gets much worse from there because they don't even understand what they're chasing. So I think there's a lot too much focus on here's how to write a good resume and go network with people, and there needs to be more focus on figure out who you are, what matters to you, and how you continue to follow that path in the way that's unique to you. Because it's that whole, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, for a large populace, it's going to have to be segmented. It's not even going to be connected with their job, but they need that, whatever that is to them. Everyone does.
Yeah. So that soundbite that you just that we just got from you, Barry, I should cut that out and transcribe it, because that sums up my work. So yeah, we both know that passion is essential. However, passion without a purpose is meaningless and frustrating. So when people from the military sports, or in my case, people going from corporate business to getting out of the corporate world, it's a different ball game. And what really is important, as I see it, is to really start to understand, identify, and embrace our purpose. And then when we find our purpose, our passion fuels it. But if we have passion and no place for it to go, that's where it can get even more frustrating and even more devastating, I believe. So first of all, thank you so much for your time. I think we might have gone a little bit longer than I led you to believe. But I also know that you're okay with that. What I do want to ask you, though, is from small town Pinckneyville to college, taking psychology and creative writing, suddenly becoming a military guy, learning that a certain type of sales isn't for you, to finding now a type of sales that is for you, which is saying, here's a need, we can fill the need, can you help us do that? That's selling, but it's not hard selling. So with all of that, with your wife and your boys and everything else, put that all together. And this question's coming because I know you listen to this every week. Barry Engelhardt, what's the point?
Well, I'll say two things. I think you've subscribed to this club, so if you can do one thing in life to make your life much better and easier for the rest of humanity, I would recommend marrying well. From someone who's married poorly and married well, there's a very distinct, profound difference that keeps giving. But I will go back to really probably something I say as much as anything and something I identify myself on, which is it's the little things done consistently that change the world. I talked about a little bit with, if you read 15 pages of a book and you do it consistently, I think consistency is the key. But if you do it consistently, you'll read 12, 13 books in a year. If you give up a can of soda a day over the year, that's a difference of 10 plus pounds. These little things, a lot of people think that they have to either do something huge, like I can't devote an hour and a half, so I won't go to the gym today. But if you just go and do what you can do consistently, that adds up way more than these big things. Plus, it also makes it a lot easier when and if you do fall off. A lot of people, I think, beat themselves up the first day they missed the gym, and then myself included in the past, well, I was less likely to go that second day because something just broke apart. Well, if you understand who you are and you have that mentality, my goal is to be fitter than I am, and you get more wins than losses, well, those little things add up. And finally, I'll say, cherish where you're at, but never forget where you came from. Remember what got you there, because you'll be a lot more relatable to a lot more people, and you'll appreciate things a whole hell of a lot more than chasing after something off in the future. Appreciate where you are and never forget what got you there.
Well, boom, there you have it. Everyone listening just got something really good from you. And a thought I had when you were talking about, maybe falling off the gym or something, we cannot allow ourselves to fall in love with perfection. Because frankly, we're human. That's the highest rank we're ever going to get, which means we're never going to be perfect. So staying focused on little things, staying focused on consistency, learning, always learning, and importantly, not having binary thinking, not having either or, it's this or it's that, it's black or it's white, is a great way to learn and grow and become the type of human you are, Barry. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom. And I look forward to probably about another 27 book reviews before the end of the year. So keep that reading going. Thank you for your time, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Cheers.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.